Welcome, Emily Lee. It is such a pleasure to speak with you and to have you here for this summit project, I suppose. Thank you so much for coming. For those who have not met you or discovered your work yet, how would you introduce yourself?
I'm a professor of philosophy, currently chair of the department at California State University in Fullerton. I specialize in the works of Maurice Merleau-Ponty. I'm a phenomenologist, and and the two other areas of specialization is philosophy of race and feminist philosophy.
So many, massive areas of really important thinking there, which I hope that we'll explore during our conversation today. But maybe a nice place to start is, how did you get involved with this? What was your journey to becoming the chair of the philosophy department and having all of these special interest topics?
Um, oh, that's a big question. Actually, let's see. I've read philosophy from high school on. I was introduced to it because I joined the Lincoln Douglas debate team, and there we read a lot of it requires reading a lot of philosophy. So I think at an early age, I read Plato's Republic, Rawls's The Theory of Justice, Nietzsche's Zarathustra, Locke's Second Treatise on Civil Government. I'm not saying that I understood most of it, but I definitely was introduced to it. So then I went to college and I took my first philosophy class as a freshman, and acted with an 18-year-old hubris and said, oh, I got this already. So I didn't major in philosophy. I think in the end I took one class on moral philosophy, and but one class I majored in political science, political philosophy actually, and some political ideas really, and economics. And there was one professor whose class I took I really enjoyed, and that was Raymond Goyce. And I think he currently teaches in England, in London, actually, at the British School of Political Science and Economics. I remember going to an office hours with him, and he was telling me how he got kicked out of the philosophy department, and they kicked him into political science, and that's how I ended up taking his class. And his background is actually in philosophy, but more continental philosophy. And I liked the works from him, I guess partly because I felt like I read most of the regular figures in analytic philosophy. And so, but it was Goyce who introduced me to Hegel and to just other figures besides the usual ones. And I think he had recommended going to Stony Brook University if I was interested in continuing. And Stony Brook at the time was considered probably the best university for pursuing continental philosophy. So, and it was there that I got introduced to Merleau-Ponty's work. I did not like it when I first read his work. His first article that I read was I and Mind, and I really didn't like the writing style. I didn't like him at all. But I think it was in a subsequent seminar on his major work, The Phenomenology of Perception, that I finally got into it. I didn't think I would be writing on philosophy of race. I did know I was interested in feminist philosophy, actually. But I think I talked about this in a interview in the New York Times, actually, where I ended up just by accident reading Patricia Hill Collins's book, The Alchemy of Race and Rights, alongside while I was reading Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception. And I really did think that the two books spoke to each other. So that's how all of this sort of got started, actually. I think that's a long-winded way of answering this question, but it's a hard question to answer. So,
And it's an inspiring one, because you're saying one of my main areas of interest right now is Merleau-Ponty, but the first time that I discovered him, it wasn't something I immediately aligned to, and it kind of gives me hope for people that might kind of discover something and go, ugh, the first time, and then eventually think, maybe there's something
Yeah.
I missed or something else.
Yeah, there were, I think some of my favorite figures, my initial reaction was not positive, actually. I was sharing that with a student of mine yesterday because she did not like the text we were currently reading. And I shared with her, well, actually, now I'm a Merleau-Ponty scholar. And when I first read him, I totally did not like him. And I think I had the same reaction with Fanon's work, actually, Black Skin, White Mask. When I first read him, I didn't really like it, but now I teach him regularly. I've written on him regularly. And yeah, so I think some texts we grow into, actually. Right? So
And would you mind sharing a little bit more? I mean, I know it's just such a massive question and we've got a
mhm,
limited amount of time, but for
mhm.
people who have never ever come across Merleau-Ponty's works, could you share a little bit about what his contribution has brought to our field?
Okay, so I mean, let me begin by saying the reason I think he's so centrally important is he centrally positions the body. So much of it's Merleau-Ponty is really a direct challenge against Descartes or Plato and Socrates and the tradition of thinking that we can overcome the limitations of our embodiment, right? When Descartes is famous for saying, I think, therefore I am, he's actually saying that we can imagine not being embodied. And that by imagining not being embodied, we can be closer to actually just being a thinking being. That's why all the jokes about disembodied figures, right? But Merleau-Ponty's work, by centrally positioning how the body impacts our thinking, challenges Descartes' position. And so that's one of the major questions that I explore with Merleau-Ponty. Feminist theories have already explored Merleau-Ponty for precisely this reason, right? Because the embodied differences of sex, right? Between how we would describe who is male and however we describe who is female, because I know that itself is quite controversial at this point with all the trans and the bi discussions, right? But whatever way we discuss it, at least feminist theories have understood that the differences of embodiment have impacted how we live in society, how we live our lives, what roles were permitted or not permitted, and all the expectations we have are so circumscribed around our body. Philosophers of race have not fully explored this yet, I think, and I think I'm best known for contributing in this direction. I think George Yancey and recently Helen No's work, Linda Alcoff's work, were some of the few people who are exploring this area, actually. So I don't know if that helps. I could go on about just phenomenology in general, but perhaps I might want to stop there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And would you mind expanding a little bit more on your contribution, on your offering and this kind of pairing that you're making in a
Mhm.
way?
Mhm. So I thought it was pretty obvious to sort of start thinking, much like the feminists did, about how the embodied differences of sex and gender impact uh, ultimately the kinds of thoughts we have, I mean, the other way that I talk about phenomenology is that phenomenology answers three areas in philosophy, three topics that philosophers really have not had a great grasp on, and it's embodiment, experience, and perception. All three of these categories, or three of these areas, I don't want to call them categories, are phenomena in that they're both subjective and objective. They're not clearly distinguishable into either objects, things that do not think, or subjects, beings who do think, right? Instead, perception, experience, and embodiment, these three areas are already immediately both materially real and laden with ideas and meanings, right? So hence both objective and subjective at the same time. So to really understand perception, experience, and embodiment, it is to understand both that you can't disentangle the materiality of that and the ideas present in our society and in our world at the same time. I think that was a backstep to say, this is where I think I've been writing that race is a phenomenon, that race is materially real in either perceptions of our skin color, whichever way we'd like to characterize it, perceptions of hair texture, perceptions of facial features that are focused upon, right, as well as perceptions of what bodily differences mark racial differences. So it's materially real, but actually these materially real differences are already also saturated with meanings from our society, right? This is why the language of philosophy of race has been, race is not real, race is socially constructed, right? And I think that language is just, it captures the way in which it is human beings who make race significant in our lives. But I think by saying race is not real, it actually dismisses the materiality of material differences that we as humans do focus upon, right? Our skin color, our hair texture, our bodily differences. So I've been arguing that race is a phenomenon, much like perception, experience, and embodiment. So I want to not only explore the material differences of race that begin in our embodiment, but also impact what kind of experiences we are likely to undergo, as well as explore the racial meanings that have not stayed static, but have changed throughout history, right? Much like, I mean, the most concrete way I always think about is that the Chinese in the United States have been categorized as Black at one point, and then now we're being, I'm not Chinese, but the Chinese are being categorized as Jewish for some, as sort of like the new whites in some ways. So these sort of racial meanings have changed historically as well, right? I hope that was, I don't know if that was clear or not, but okay.
It was clear and absolutely fascinating, and I'm wondering kind of where are you at with that line of research now, and where do you know where you're going with it? Like, what is the kind of message that at this present moment you'd love to be sharing?
Yeah, so I think I just submitted my book. Hopefully it'll come out in the fall, where I do make the argument at least that race is a phenomenon. But I think you're asking the question, okay, so once you've made that argument and made clear that race is a phenomenon, what can we say about this, right? What I'm hoping it'll do is help us understand that, one, I don't think race is going to go away. And two, that if anything, the meanings of race are going to change. And what we focus on in terms of our embodiment, it is going to change, right? So that I'm hoping that we become more aware in a meta sense, I guess, of that the changing meanings of race as well, and hence then be able to explore that we're not going to have one solution to the problem of race, that we're going to end up having to newly recognize, oh, that this is occurring because of race. It has changed, and how else can we address it, right? So I think that's what I'm hoping to see. Yeah.
And on
kind of,
carry on.
Yeah, I was just going to say kind of a more dynamic understanding of the functionings of race.
And I'm curious on an individual level, you know, hearing this, understanding it, relating to that, do you feel that on an individual level we can actively make a difference towards the perceptions and understandings of and meanings of race?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, because that's a fantastic question, Natalie, because I think all of this is personal, right? It's and I don't want to be caught up in just going, oh, society does this, because it's just so divorced from like how we live every day, right? And it also sort of, if we just go, oh, it's history, it's society, then we end up not recognizing our own responsibility and contribution to the circumstances, right? So I'm really glad you asked this question about how to how does this understanding personally impact us, right? And I guess what the best way I think about this personally too, and I think about this, so I'll just share with you the ways that I think about it personally, right? I think one of the things that I've been grappling with lately is sort of coming into a middle class status. I grew up in the Bronx, but now as a functioning academic, right, I've kind of risen to the middle class, and I'm raising a daughter who is a middle class child, and she goes to a good public school, and she's surrounded, I think, about 80% of the time by white children. And I wonder about what this implies for her. I've been thinking about what does it imply for, I'm uncomfortable with the middle class status in many ways. And I'm wondering about how much am I contributing to, I think in whiteness theory, there's been talk about privilege hoarding, actually opportunity hoarding, actually. And apparently, where my consciousness about the ramifications of race, I think where it really is going to have an impact is on how much do I make sure that the middle class opportunities my child is exposed to is not just hoarded by myself, but instead spread among the other 20% of the kids who do come into her school as part of school of choice programs, so that they're not from this neighborhood, they are from other neighborhoods, right? And just kind of really thinking about the way that race and class intersect, and how do I personally, right, contribute to making sure she has experiences and she has exposure to other ways of living besides her comfortable middle class life, right? So yeah, I don't know if that was concrete enough of an answer for you at this point, but yeah, I've been thinking a lot more about opportunity hoarding right at this point in my life.
And that's a really, helpful and personalizable message to kind of leave that with, because it's not that there's just one generic answer of, oh, okay, well, this is the understanding I found and here's exactly what everybody should do, but it's more like, here's an offering of a way of thinking about race and class and status and all of this, and have a think individually what that means to you, what opportunities might you be hoarding, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm thinking about it in contrast too, because I have family who are in need. They are still in the Bronx, and so I think daily about where is my position in relation to them as well, right? So I think, because that's still very personal too, right? As well as think about what is my relation to organizations like Kids in Need, right? Where they are providing legal services for kids who show up at the borders, right? Who are so yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking. That's I guess all I could say at this point.
And that's definitely a hope that of this summit, is just to kind of get people thinking, and they don't have to necessarily take massive action from it, but you never know what little thoughts inspired. Like you were saying, the first time that you came across philosophy, there were influential books, but there was an influential particular person, and all it takes is that one, hearing that one idea, and you never know, we may never know, what this can ripple onto, making these kind of ideas more widely known. Now, I know we spoke about phenomenology a bit, but this summit is also looking at existential philosophies, and I wonder if you have a way of kind of defining it or understanding it that you wouldn't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think the traditional definition of existentialism, so phenomenology and existentialism always had a relationship together. Jean-Paul Sartre was Merleau-Ponty's best friend until they had a fallout. But Sartre still did his, when Merleau-Ponty died, Sartre gave a talk at his, at his funeral, actually. I forgot the word for that, right? So, but yeah, so they've always had a relationship. So I think the main point from existentialism and why I would describe myself as an existentialist is that, I mean, here's the thing that I appreciate about existentialism. It's against fatalism, right? It's against the idea that one is born with a fate. It's against Aristotelian teleological ideas that we're just, we're born with a potential and we just need to fulfill it, right? It's against astrology, that's for sure, right? And it's against the idea that there is one being who controls everything, right? And instead it centers on me, myself, and I, to say that my actions and my decisions have an impact on my life, right? That I'm not, fate does not just guide me, right? And I think, and the way that I appreciate existentialism is that I do focus on, I really like, Lewis Gordon said this, I think, I thought he said it really beautifully. He said that although in the present, I am a sum of all my actions from the past, it is from the present that I make choices to determine what future self I am or I can become, right? So I mean, and he says it's kind of a conundrum in the present, right? Because in the present I am just the sum of my past self, right? And all the history and all the conditions that led to this. But the incredible, powerful point is that it is from this moment on, right, that I make decisions, I proceed to take actions to make a future self, right? So that really, I think, captures just how important the present is, right? This, and how incredibly powerful the present is, right? And so if I have any vision of what kind of a person I want to be in the future, it is the small, maybe big actions from the present that's going to help us get towards that future, right? So I know Derrida critiqued phenomenology for being too much of a present-oriented, presentist is what he called us, right? And I mean, I understand what he's saying, but I think that I still don't want to downplay just how important the present is for any direction into the future, right? Yeah.
You say that you love the fact that it's about life not being determined, and that we're not just filling a destiny that's already set out for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I find myself in these interviews asking questions which I feel like might arise in a client of mine that I'm working with or have worked with that might watch this and respond to this. And for me, my body's responding that with many of my clients whose thoughts of being responsible is just terrifying.
Yeah.
This idea of life being not predetermined is almost equated with them to not having meaning. And if they haven't kind of fallen in love with the way that I've seen, which is that meaning is about creativity, but I wonder, how you'd respond to that, to someone who was watching this, hearing this idea of it not being predetermined and thinking, but that's horrible. Why?
Yeah, I think my nephew suffers from that one too, actually. too. But and it's real, isn't it? I think Dostoevsky isn't it, in the Brothers Karamazov, the passage, right, about Jesus comes back and I think right, he says that that's the one thing human beings don't want is choice, right? That they fear the freedom of choice, right? Absolutely. Yeah. I think I went through I loved Dostoevsky all through high school, actually. I think so I ended up reading all of his works and found that one to be pretty fascinating, especially I myself am a recovering Catholic. So I totally empathize with that. I understand that it's because it's freedom is also the responsibility, right? It comes together at the same time, right? I mean, the other way to think about this too, in terms of the ways in which freedom and responsibility are so intricately tied together, right? Is the other way to think about this is the way that life and death are so tied together, isn't it? That because it's uh, the fear of the responsibility and the burden of the responsibility is very akin to the fear of death and the inevitability of it, right? Because if you're afraid of freedom, basically what you're really afraid of is living and all the sort of choices involved in living, right? So I completely understand the weight of the fear of the responsibility. I completely understand and empathize with that. And I feel it as a burden every single day too, when I get up and I have to figure out, what am I doing today? Exactly. What do I have on my schedule? I think sometimes I like putting things on my schedule just to have something to do that day, like go, oh, I should at least prepare for that, right? So, and as you know, as a researcher, that's kind of the openness of having to, okay, what am I reading today, making decisions about what am I addressing today, right? I completely empathize with that. But it's interesting because my daughter, who's 7, is going through this fear of death right now. She's so, I think I realized later that I think I went through a fear of really kind of fearing existential death, actually, not physical death. And I think it was at 7 too, when I started, I wasn't worried so much about physically dying, but I was worried about that when I die, I may not remember myself. So that was the one that I think scared me at 7, from 7 on, right? Because that's really death if I don't even remember myself, right? So, but I think a woman I talked to, an artist, she consoled me by saying that actually every single day we forget a part of who we are, right? Memory is specious, isn't it? So every single day we forget some part of ourselves, so that in a way, every single day we do die a little bit in that regard. So I don't know if that sounds depressing or not, right? But for me, it was consoling, to tell you the truth, to kind of see the immediateness of life and death. It isn't simply, death isn't just something far, far away, right? But to kind of understand the immediateness of life and death on an everyday basis, in the way that every single day a part of me dies and a part of me gets born. I think that helped console me, right? So coming back to the weight of responsibility, I think about that the weight of responsibility, I think, is bearable if we think in terms of it's that it is that responsibility every single day, right? That is twinned with freedom, right? And I will say one last thing about this. I think I've been going on for quite a while, but one last thing about this is that I when I'm having a really hard time, I'm experiencing difficulties myself personally, or not, whether I'm fighting with my husband or fighting with my daughter, or just, got rejected from it. My papers got rejected, or something, like, I guess these, I mean, some of them maybe are just first world problems. We'll say get rejection, it was probably just it. But when I'm in the midst of arguing with someone I dearly love, or something like this, I think the one thing that consoles me is focusing on one day at a time, right? Just focusing on the present and realizing that if I can just get through and make simple, short, right, just immediate decisions, it helps with the weight of the responsibility, right? I think that, so again, I think coming back to focus on the present, I think does help. I think if we start thinking about the responsibility in terms of from now and forever, then I think it can feel so much more heavy, right? But I think focusing on one day, this moment, the present, I think helps a great deal.
That I really appreciate you saying that, because I think it's so valuable to remember that so much of this panic and fear which is with us in the present moment is about chunks of future, right?
Yeah.
Chunks of future, and that is our responsibility, yes, for sure, but so is the present moment. And in the present moment, we cannot be expected to complete or come up with this amazing, immediately implementable plan for this whole massive chunk of our future, which might mean the next big project or the next entire career or our entire life's legacy all in one moment. I think so much of the time people walk around having this as a kind of massive questioning or responsibility. That this is where I guess even my hands are doing that, this is that weight, this is that burden that people carry around. And like you say, it's in that present moment. And what I wanted to add to that is sometimes that present moment might just be sit on your chair and breathe. Like, don't, expecting literally nothing of yourself other than just being and seeing. And I guess this is where the embodied comes in for me. I find it so valuable too, to recognize what is our body needing right now, what is our basic being needing right now. And then when you've sat with that and when you've nurtured that and when you're feeling like you can breathe again, like your head is more clear, that is when you can start to think about even bigger projects, like what to have for breakfast or what to take for your university degree or whatever. But I think there's just so much weight that people put on themselves all the time of these big projects.
I think breaking it down to the immediate right now and just the next thing you need to accomplish for just today, right? And I think sometimes having long to-do lists do not help, right? Because I think that the long to-do list feels so overwhelming, right? So just like breaking it down to, I think when I have a long to-do list, I'm just like, I'm only going to do 2, 1 maybe, and I'm moving on the list. It's okay, right? So it does not all have to be done right now, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. I think over the years I've learned to as well. Sometimes just give myself a break. I actually, especially when I feel the pressure, I do what you do, like whether it's just having, I'm trying to get off too much caffeine, so because I've noticed that makes me anxious too, so I do at least just try to sit and have a glass of water. And the thing that I go to regularly is just read a novel. It really just helps me. Like, it's not reading philosophy, it is reading a novel, but just even like giving myself 30 minutes just to sit still and let everything else wait, I think helps. I think it's about taking care of myself first, right? Just and see what it is. It's funny, it calms my mind, I was going to say, although I think you were right to focus on it. It calms my body and my breathing, I think, as well. And I totally agree with you.
And we've spoken about the power of just one person's one sentence, like your the person that calmed you about this idea of life and death not being these chunks of collision, but just a gentle, gradual process, you know, the
Yeah.
power of just someone saying one thing that impacts you and can just carry you for ages. And you've spoken about books as well, that have
Mhm.
been really life-changing and meaningful for you. But I'm curious, for people who might not always necessarily align with books so much, are there any other directions into philosophy, or these kind of ways of thinking that you would recommend for anyone watching?
Oh, you mean aside from reading books, not philosophy books? What kind of, so not books, right? I mean, I am like heavily, you know, but I mean, you know, I was a potter for 10 years, actually. I only stopped because when I got pregnant and the belly and all that sort of stuff. And you know, I've always taken art classes throughout my youth. And you know, I don't, you know, we talk about taking care of yourself, right? And I think we're um I so the, I guess why am I stumped? I think you know, I think in the end of the day, if you could find moments of joy, you're being an existentialist, right? Like moments of and you know, joy is ephemeral like that. It will be just moments. It won't be long. It won't be structural, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why joy can be so joyful, is that it's ephemeral, right? If it's systematic, it's not going to be joyful, right? But I think finding moments of joy really is I think you're already being an existentialist if you are, right? So for me, it has been things like making a pot, or taking a dance class. I'm awful at it. I have no beat at all. Right? But I think just even enjoying the fact that I'm messing up and laughing about it, right? I think the being able to laugh at myself for not being good at something. I think just finding, you know, moments of joy like that. I think yeah, I think that makes all the difference in the world, does it not? I mean, I think beauty, right, it makes a huge difference in one's life, right? I was just listening to an interview about a woman. She was just going off about trees. She was just like, oh, if you see a tree, isn't that just perfect? And it's just like you break into a smile too, does it not? Right? It's just like, so for her, it's been about just taking a walk outside in a park just to see a tree. And I think she's totally right. It makes all the difference, does it not? Just finding moments of joy, I think. And yeah, I don't think we could underplay um, laughter, beauty, right? Being able to, I think these things help us to get decentered from our own selves, right? To be able to not take ourselves so seriously, but also at the same time, we are taking ourselves seriously when we give ourselves moments of respite, right? Like that. So yeah, I don't think I could give one specific way, but for me, it's sometimes just ice cream makes me very happy, right? Right. Taking a moment and letting yourself do that, right? I think, yeah, yeah. I don't know what else to say, and I don't think that, you know, I think different people have different moments of finding joy, right? So, but yeah.
That's so beautiful. And what kind of that translated to me as, it's about existing, it's about
Yeah.
just being in that moment, letting yourself, giving yourself that permission to just be. And I think obviously there's a kind of irony that I love thinking about existentialism. I love the writing, I love the reading, I love the talking and the intellectualizing. But at the same time, I'm so aware that that is also been my greatest source of suffering, and is many clients and people's greatest source of suffering is this thinking about it. It's the way that we're thinking about it, and how we're giving it space, and how we're sitting with it. But we don't always have to be thinking, but we're because we're human beings, we are thinking, we're programmed to be thinking, and it's these moments that we can create for ourselves that take us away from thinking about existing, if that's too intense, and just existing. We always are, but adding to that by making it joyful, so we're not just in the dark room, crunched up,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so interesting that you said begin with your love and hate of the written word, or the process of reading, right, and the process of writing too, right? So yeah, it's funny how many of these dualisms we have, right, that live together: freedom and responsibility, life and death, like, and reading and, I don't know, thinking and not thinking. Thinking and being, is that, how should we characterize these two together, right? Yeah, no, I completely share with you that. Like, I love reading philosophy, but I need to take a break from that. Right? I think it's one of the reasons why, when I started graduate school in philosophy, I also signed up for a ceramics class for the first time. I'd been taking painting or sculpting and drawing classes like all through my youth. I think I just needed a venue to not use words, I think is what was going on. So, but yeah, because I wanted a space where I did not have to use words, and did not have to, I just needed to get out of that sort of headspace, right? And I liked the pottery because there was an immediateness, like, because the wheel sort of demands you focus on it, because otherwise the clay just melts or falls apart, or flies off. Actually, it's actually, unlike painting or drawing, there's still there, it's very conceptual still. I think there's still a lot of thinking going on, but I like the pottery because the wheel just demands so much attention out of you, right? But I think that so I totally agree with you that at some point, for me, the writing process is like that too, actually. Like, I hate it. But then it's only through the writing process that I really do finally come up with an understanding, an idea. And then when I do, I love it, right? Then I'm just like, then my whole world changes, because I have this new lens to look at the world through, right? But at the beginning stages of writing, or even the middle stages of writing, it's just slugging along. It's just awful. It's just, I'm like, I don't know why I do it. At times I feel like, I think my husband's constantly like, "You're tenured. I don't know why you keep writing and why you work so hard in it." But I mean, there is, again, the same kind of, I guess, love hate, the dualism about it, right? Like the pain and the suffering actually does lead to my greatest, is one of my sources of happiness, when I finally feel like I got something, like I understand something, right? Like, so yeah, it is funny, isn't it? Right? It's pretty funny.
I think it really is, and I love this idea of giving yourself a space away from words, a space away from words. That's so well put. I think I'm curious, as you speak about the pottery and how you were saying, parts of us, die and parts of us grow. Do you feel that pottery part of yourself is gone forever, or do you think that you will?
No. I think I will return. I really did enjoy it a lot. I think just raising a child is a lot more work than I thought. It's well, I did not know it would be this much. I didn't even want a child till I was 35, and then I think my doctors were just like, if you're going to do it, this is it. And so I think I'm cursing out Iris Marion Young and her articles on pregnant embodiment, and Carol Bigwood on pregnant embodiment. They made me feel like I wanted to at least try out pregnancy, the embodiment, especially as someone who works on embodiment, I guess I kind of wanted to try out, they were describing pregnancy as a moment where clearly the subjective and the objective are intertwined, right? Where clearly a moment where we transgress that sort of dichotomous embodiment. That's how they described pregnancy. And that's why I kind of wanted to try it out, and I think I didn't think through that I'm now have this child that I need to actually raise, so, and they're dependent on you for such a long time. They really are. So I'm joking about it. I love my daughter and whatnot, but boy, are they a lot of work, right? And it's a lot of mental and physical work too. So I think she's just taken out more than I thought. I think as soon as she's more capable, I'm planning on signing all of us up for ceramics classes. So as soon as she reaches the age where they let her come to our classes, we're all just going to sign up. She's actually been taking ceramics classes herself, actually, because if I could sign up for her class, I would, but they're not letting me. So as soon as we can, I think the whole family is planning on it. I love playing with clay, right? Dirt. I mean, think about that, and feeling your hands meld into, just dirt. And clay and mud, right? Like it's very sensual. It really does feel like you're making something out of whole cloth, right? So and so she's been doing that as well. So no, I don't think that part. I think that I will probably go back, and sooner than you think, actually, before retirement. Okay. Yeah. So.
I really appreciate you speaking so truthfully about that, because I think there is such, and now's not the time, but there is such a huge stigma around women saying anything other than I had a baby because that is my destiny, and I adore the whole experience. And I think it's so liberating
No.
for women to hear from other women or other people, actually this is a really intense, challenging, embodied, physical, psychological, spiritual experience, bringing another human into the world. I mean, that's mad.
No, I was totally averse to it, because I think the stereotypes around moms are just not, moms are not thinking beings, right? So the idea, right? So so I think I was very averse to it, actually. Gail Weiss has a really nice article about being a mom and a philosopher, actually, that was very, very nicely put, the way that although moms are supposed to be just emotional and sensitive, but not thinking beings. So I think that's another dichotomy that actually kind of did not encourage me to, did not plant in me a desire to be a mom, right? I will admit that. I wonder what my daughter will think if she ever sees this video. So, but, yeah.
I think hopefully by the time she'll see it, she'll have understood all of your diverse way of thinking, and know it's coming from a really, a powerful, empowering, good place. Yeah. Now it's not just your children that you care for, it's your students as well. And I'm aware that we've got a little bit of a time. But before we close the interview, Emily, is there anything else that you would like to add? I really appreciate you coming along today.
No, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much. It's been nice to take a moment to think about my own journey here, and it's helped me. Actually, there was a question in one of the ones that you said where I thought that was interesting, where you said, what are you best known for in terms of my work? And I think we answered that question, but I think there was another question that you had, which is, what would you like to be known for? Which I thought that was really interesting, because I mean, I think my immediate answer to that when I was thinking about it was, well, I'd just like to be known for one idea that might be considered universal or general. But then I realized, no, actually, no, I don't think I have that much of an ego, is what I realized, because I think the question is an ego question, right? Like, it's about fame and And I realized that's not actually why I do this and why I'm here. I think what I realized is, I did think a lot about how I wanted to live my life. And here Aristotle did had an effect on me. I don't know where I'm going to end up. And I can't control the circumstances of how I got here, right? Being an Asian American woman, being an immigrant and all that. But I think what Aristotle did make clear is, how did I want to live my life? That I have control over, right? Like the steps that I'm taking. And I think in that way, it is very existentially centered, right? About what is the day-to-day steps I want to take. And that's how I became here. It is that I actually do like the doing philosophy. I do enjoy the reading. I do enjoy the writing, even as I hate it at the same time. But I can't just read novels now. I need to read a novel and then read philosophy books, because I like the ordering of the ideas together in philosophy books, right? And I think I'm doing this because I'm looking for others to continue to share my ideas with, and in term, because I want an interlocutor to tell me, no, Emily, you're so wrong there, and or just say, oh, this was interesting, but so how else to think about it. I think I'm doing this because I'm looking for a community to keep thinking and talking about these, because I'm just trying to understand, right? Something small, something about how I want to live my life and how I should live my life, right? So yeah, I think that's what I would like to focus on, right? Is who find my community, right? To keep having these thoughts. So I really appreciated our conversation, because I feel like it was part of that process that I was looking for. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Honestly, it's given me so many kind of takeaways, as it were. And just to respond to what you were saying there about what I'd like to be known for, and this idea of it being a little bit potentially ego driven, this way of thinking. I think it's not uncommon to think about our legacy, what we'd like to be known for, and it's what we were kind of speaking about in kind of chunks of being responsible for determining our future and how we will be remembered, and this idea of death being part of us being forgotten in some way. And I think that can, when we're in a place of less energy and less vibrancy, we can struggle with the idea of our legacy and what we are being known for and what we are putting out into the world, if we've had dreams of any big projects.
Yeah.
But sometimes in those moments, I think just being a kind person is a nice thing to be remembered for, and that kindness, even in the darkest moment where we're just completely needing to be by ourselves, just being kind to ourselves can just that can be enough in that moment. I don't know quite why that connection came for me there, but I felt like that's what that inspired from me. Yeah.
No, I don't mean to say that it was a bad question. I think it is the kind of question we're asked daily, right? About what do we want to be. So I didn't mean to imply any sort of normative judgment about the question. I think, right? I think it was just I think it is just that more recently I've just kind of realized to some extent, just I'm one little thing out of this universe. And I don't know if it's because I've been reading Ken Liu's books. He's a sci-fi writer, and he's really good about sort of locating us as small, tiny little beings in the universe. So I guess he's given me some pause about, and because I think I definitely wondered about it in terms of what is my contribution to society. But I think that I think lately I've been thinking more in terms of what is that I am just one small being. And Maybe that's enough. I'll stop there.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware of time, and as much as I
Mhm.
would love to keep talking, we have to bear your
Mhm.
excitedly awaiting student in mind, I'm sure. So
Okay.
I just want to say thank you so
Mhm.
much. Yeah, you've left me with so many thoughts, and I absolutely can't wait to edit and share this video with hopefully many people.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this project, Natalie. It's a really well thought through project. I appreciate being a part of it. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.